Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our guest today, Gail Eaton-Briggs from Hobart in Tasmania. Hello, Gail. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks, Silvia. It's great to be here, and thank you. And yes, lovely to be here from Hobart in Tasmania, in Australia.
You're most welcome. So, for anyone who is new to our channel, we call this channel the Brain Friendly Channel. And the topics that we talk about are topics that have to do with personal growth, how to optimize our brain function, how to become better people leaders, and improve our workplaces and societies. So, today we have Gail, who is an author, a speaker, a thought leader, and she specializes in developing people's solutions. But Gail is a kind of a surprise box because she also is a celebrant for funerals and weddings. So anyone who is getting married in Tasmania, at least, or in other parts of Australia, they call Gail to give these beautiful speeches that she gives on every occasion. And she also runs workshops and facilitates for public and private organizations. So you have had an amazing career, Gail. We have known each other for a number of years. And tell us a little bit about yourself so the audience can get to know you better.
Mm. Thank you, Sylvia. Yes, I'm a born and bred Tasmanian girl. I had lots of opportunities to go and live in other places in Australia to further my career, but always chose to stay here in Tasmania because I do think it is the best place in probably the world, but definitely in Australia. I have had loads of experience working in local government and the state government, but my roles have always been really focused on people and working with people to be able to maximise their potential and maximise their contribution to the community and to the organisation that I've been working in. I love my family. I'm very family oriented, and if anybody asks me what my hobbies have been over the last 18 years, well, it has been celebrant work. So when I was working in executive roles in the government, I also had my business, Great Hobart Weddings, running along on the side. And I did that because it was my fun stuff. And it was the thing that I could do where I could really connect with people and know that I was making a huge difference to them in their time. I left the state service back in August 2019. I left on a whim. Had a bit of a moment one afternoon when I thought, you know what, I've been really suffering some significant values clashes day in, day out for probably 3 years. It is time. It is time to move on and spread my entrepreneurial wings a bit further. So I created Everywhen Solutions, which is my business, and I do my Celebrant work under that banner. And I now am a very busy funeral celebrant, as well as doing the other things that Silvia has mentioned. And the other thing that I do that I find incredibly interesting, rewarding, and challenging is working with families and children that are on the edge of the child protection system here in Tasmania. So, working as a family group conference facilitator to bring family members together to facilitate them being able to come up with a safety plan to keep their children safe and allow child safety service to step out of their lives. So that's another dimension. It's certainly not such happy work until you kind of meet that family in the supermarket later on and they say, yes, we've still got our little person with us, and you think, yay, my job was done well that day. So that's a bit about me, Silvia.
Yeah. So you are a very well-rounded person when it comes to activities, and that's fantastic. I know someone that very close to my heart that has worked in the same area of child protection, and it's really a very tough job for anyone who is involved. And it's my kudos to you, Gail, for continuing doing that work. It's fantastic. So
Thank you.
we are going through a huge humanitarian crisis at the moment, and we also have this floods that are going on in Queensland, in Sydney today, in all New South Wales. And I look at the title of your book, which is called Conscious Grit. So we are going to get into this in a moment. But how do we develop conscious grit, particularly in situations that are beyond our control and what we want to see in the world happening?
Yes, and it's a great question. And gosh, what my heart goes out to so many people in so many communities at the moment. It's an incredibly tough situation. Conscious grit, and, as Silvia said, I'm sure we'll get into it a bit more, but fundamentally for me, it is that ability to be in the face of adversity, be persistent, determined, be resilient, be tenacious, and adopt a growth mindset and just try your absolute hardest to stay in that zone of having a growth mindset. So thinking that things are possible. You can't necessarily fix everything all at once, but there is good in situations, and that you can work together, you can collaborate, you can get support from other people, you can give support to other people, you can do some planning, set some goals. And in these situations, they might just be baby steps and baby goals, but you can set those goals and you can work towards them using, relationships and networks. But, fundamentally for me, it is that ability to find your growth mindset and put it into action. And, for some people who haven't been used to thinking in that way, it's a hard thing to do. But in my model that I'll talk a bit more about, there's a key point, and that is to have a tipping point. And gosh, if this isn't the tipping point for people to think differently about how to manage this situation, then I'm not sure what is. So I would say, think positive, set your goals, do your planning, find your relationships, find your supporters, figure out who you can support, and don't be held back by limiting beliefs of the past.
Yeah. And what you're describing is it's interesting because in the workplace, sometimes people get easily disappointed and they don't want to continue, or they find faults, or they blame people around them, but they're not willing to do that extra step to try to reach out to people. But when there are situations of emergency, most people want to help others in need.
Yeah,
I would say that that's the natural state of our mind. If someone
yeah.
needs help, we go out and help. This morning I was reading that a famous Spanish chef has put all his team together and go to Poland to prepare 4,000 meals a day for all these refugees that are coming through. Yesterday, a neighbor just in one of these neighborhoods that was completely flooded started to cook at home, and then she went with the meals and fed the people that were doing the cleanup. So what is it? What differentiates people when it comes to this determination, or this grit, as you call it, between moments of emergency where we can see people stepping up, and then we see them in the workplace and they don't step up? Well, what's the difference?
I think that there's we in an emergency situation, we're not held back by a culture that has been established and perpetuated over many years, whereas in a workplace, the norms that are evident, they are so strong and so powerful, and they really do hold people back in terms of their normal everyday work. But it's interesting that you use that example, because what I've noticed is that if they're in a workplace, if somebody, for example, is really unwell, or has a family member who passes away, or a child who has some kind of a crisis, and there's a fundraiser, people actually do band together for the purposes of supporting that particular event, that crisis, that moment in time. And yet come back to work the next week or the following week, and they've kind of dissolved back into a silo mentality with the culture of the past, often, permeating pretty much every interaction and the way they work. So it is really interesting. There is something that really drives the human behaviour and the human psyche to really respond well in times of crisis and pull together to do that.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. And
Yes.
for anyone who is in a leadership position and they role model certain behaviors that they want to see in their people, it's so important that they develop themselves in order to have the values that most people will want to see in the workplace. Otherwise, people become disengaged, and the productivity goes down very quickly. Yesterday, I had a call from a client that was saying that most people have done a leadership program, but 1 year after, they are going back to the normal behaviors that they used to display before the program, and they say, well, we just want to survive, we just want the check
Mm.
month to month, we don't want to develop personally. So what would you say to these people?
Oh gosh, I would say that they are missing out on creating opportunities for themselves, for the family, for their work, organisation, and they're just missing out on, and it sounds so cliche, but maximizing their potential. But, those three words, maximizing their potential, can mean so much. I know that, in my situation that I talk about in my book, that, it was a critical event in my life. If I'd have decided at that point, after 5 years of procrastinating, if I'd have continued to procrastinate and not actually moved on, I just think that my potential would not have been fully, utilised out there. And I know that I've done some good things. So I just think, people don't stay where you are. Don't just get your head down and bury into survivor mode. It is about thinking about the future. It is about figuring out what tools you need so that you can lift out of this state that you're in at the moment. It's not worth staying there in that way, there where you're flat or you're constrained or you're not optimizing or maximizing your potential. It's just not worth it.
Okay, so that's a very valuable concept for anyone who is listening. So tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write this book called Conscious Grid.
Mm. So my motivation came from um, a lot of deep thinking and a lot of reflecting that I've done over many years, really thinking about, a critical event that happened in my life, why it happened, how I managed it, could I have done it differently, could I have done it better? I'm the perpetual reflector and thinker of what could I have done differently. Um, and I had an opportunity at the end of 2019 to do some work with the Thought Leader Business School, and they're in Victoria. And I really needed, my thoughts were all over the place. So I really needed to get my thoughts together around, to make sense, I guess, of some stuff that had happened in my life. And it was when I did that work, I came up with what I consider to be a fabulous container for my thoughts, which is the conscious grit model. And then in 2020, of course, COVID, hit us all really badly. And I had just started my business at the end of 2019. All of a sudden, I had a bit of time on my hands, and I thought, look, sometimes the universe does tell you to get on with it. And so I've been thinking about my life. I've been thinking about the container. My brother had been saying to me for years, sis, you've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. And I thought, right, okay, no more binging Netflix. I am going to write the book. So I did. And I started writing in March 2020, and I had my first copy in my hand in March 2021. So it took, a year and about, I reckon, 240,000 words to be able to produce a book that has 58,000 words. And then I had a book launch in Hobart in May last year. And that was fantastic. So that's how the motivation and the process, I guess, for writing the book came about, Silvia.
Okay, that's fantastic, and congratulations for having your book ready. And it's a good use of your time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, so tell us a little bit about the conscious grid model, and if you can cover those concepts about tipping point, that would be very helpful.
Yes, sure. So the conscious grit model has three components to it, and I present it as an equation. And the equation goes unconscious grit plus tipping point equals conscious grit. So unconscious grit is a zone. It is a zone where and I describe this as being a place where you are persistent, tenacious, determined, resilient, using a little bit of courage, but you're in some circumstances that need a lot more than that. You can't move forward. You can't get to where you want to go. And you just feel absolutely weighed down by the situation that you're in and by the restrictions that it's providing you. So you might feel like, you're a hamster on a wheel, or that you're wading through treacle, or, somebody said to me the other day, I feel like I'm eating soup with a fork. And I thought that's a perfect description of what it feels like to be in that zone of unconscious grit. But then to get to the zone of conscious grit is a much better place to be. It's where you're still all of those things. You're still tenacious, persistent, determined, and resilient, but you start to use what I call big C courage. And you start to, your mindset changes, and you start to value being in that growth mindset phase. And you start to plan, and you set goals, and then you achieve those goals. So you do a bit more planning, and you put some more goals into place, and you achieve those. And you start to be so confident that you can even deal with your limiting beliefs, because you are seeing yourself make progress. You're seeing the other people around you respond differently to you. You're responding better out there in the world, and you are able to make decisions and create opportunities for yourself. But the thing that joins those two states, or those zones of unconscious grit and conscious grit, is a tipping point. And a tipping point is absolutely critical they're all around us. I'm convinced of that. They're all around us all of the time. But you've got to be able to go, oh, okay, I'm taking that as a sign, if you like, or an opportunity, and I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to hold on to it, and I'm going to turn that into the tipping point that flicks me from being in unconscious grit to conscious grit. So those tipping points can be a whole range of things. And I had so my tipping point in my story was actually going to a doctor after I had been in what I now recognise the zone of unconscious grit for 5 years. I went to a doctor, and he said, "Gail, go and get a lawyer. It's time." Okay, that's all I needed. I just needed that validation that I wasn't making things up, that things were difficult. He affirmed my fears that I had at the time, and it was the tipping point that I needed. Now, I'm not saying that you go from your tipping point into the zone of conscious grit and everything is absolutely rosy straight away. You've still got a lot of work to do, but my goodness, you've actually got a huge springboard when you've grabbed that tipping point. And I was talking to one of I do quite a bit of coaching using the I4 neuro leader model and the conscious grit concept. And I was chatting with a client the other day, and she talked about her tipping point, and I just have to read it to you because it was just beautiful. She had a lot of stuff going on in her life, in relation to job, health, relationship. And then she said she had a moment, and her tipping point was she realized that she wanted to change her daughter's perception of what happiness looks like, so she knows what she deserves. I thought that was
Wow.
pretty powerful and pretty beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
So
Yes.
that's great. And tell me a little bit, for people who need to get unstuck, what's the first step they can take in your view?
Yes. So, in my view, it is just having a bit of a reality check, because to get unstuck, um, you've got to find your tipping point. But you might need to do a few things before that so that you can get your mindset right to be able to realize that something is a tipping point. So, one thing is to realize that you cannot drive a parked car. It will
Yeah.
not move. So,
Yeah.
you've got to just figure out, what is going to motivate you, and figure out that, you are the person who is in control of the vehicle. There's another little equation I use in the book, which is, event plus response equals outcome. And if you, so the event might be, oh God, I'm so tired, I'm so worn out, I can't do this anymore. The outcome is going to be more of the same unless you choose a different response to whatever it is that you've been doing in the past. So getting unstuck does require a sense of taking responsibility and realizing that I want to get unstuck. I no longer want to try and drive a parked car. And then it's about figuring out, how what is the depth of your stuckness, if you like. Now, I'm not sure if that's a word, but you can be a little bit stuck, or you can be really, really stuck. So if you can figure out where you are on the scale of stuckness, you've got a starting point, and then figure out what your attitude is to becoming unstuck. So, one of the exercises in the book is just picturing a set of steps, and you're on the bottom step, which is, I can't get unstuck. Well, if that's where you're feeling, okay, let's start from that mindset. The next one is, I hope I can get unstuck. That's a little bit better than being I can't. The next one up is, I will try to get unstuck. And then, I want to get unstuck. I will do the best I can to get unstuck. I'm doing the best I can to get unstuck, or I'm doing whatever it takes to get unstuck. So it's figuring out where you are and then being able to take it from there. And if you can't take it from there yourself, find someone who can help you, and it might be as simple as having what I call an accountability partner, someone who you can say, look, I'm in this situation. I really want to get unstuck. I don't know how to do it. Can we talk through? Can we just throw some ideas around? And, sometimes that is the little trigger. That might be the tipping point to get you into being able to make the move that you need to.
It's a wonderful philosophy, and I think that many people will start to think about all these steps and where they are at until you're able to say, I am unstuck.
Yes,
And yes,
absolutely. Yes.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that it happens, in to anyone in various stages of their life. I always said that life is like you go up and up and up, and then there's a plateau, and then you realize you are in a plateau, and then you decide to fill your bucket with a new dream or desire, and then you start to go up and chase that dream. So
Yeah.
it's a curve that has plateaus, and when you are in those plateaus, your mind starts to think, I am unstuck and I don't know what to do next, or I don't know, nothing motivates me, or I don't have a
Mm,
goal or a dream like you have. So we all say these things at different stages of our lives, depending on
ab-
what's going on. And so
absolutely.
this
Yeah.
example that you're providing, it's a very useful one. And you talk a lot about curiosity and courage, which that they are pillars of or behaviors or skills of the iPhone neuroleader model. How do you use them in your conscious grid model?
I think there are a number of pillars in the I4 neuroleader assessment that I'm particularly attracted to, and two of them are curiosity and courage. And I talked about the difference between being in unconscious grit and conscious grit is using little c courage or big C courage. Yes, there you go, there it is. And for me, the courage, we all have limiting beliefs. We've all been through a childhood. Our beliefs and our belief systems have been developed within the culture of the community and the parenting experience that we've had as we've grown up. And I think that to recognise that sometimes our courage levels can have been, reduced quite a bit during that period for whatever reason, not because you had, poor parents, but or lived in a community that was, not a healthy community, but just because you're living in a time and place that's different to the time and place that we're in now. And I think that actually more courage is needed now than it has been in the past, because things are, we say we live in this VUCA world of volatility, ambiguity, complexity, and uncertainty. Gosh, you've got to have some courage to be able to deal with that. So I certainly encourage trying things out. And I think this is where curiosity and courage go hand in hand, because if you're curious, then you are at the same time building your courage. Because if you're being curious when you're interacting with somebody and perhaps asking things that you wouldn't normally ask, perhaps going into a meeting and putting something on the table that you want the group to talk about because you're interested in it, you're curious, that's actually also a form of building your courage muscles, because maybe you haven't done that before and you're feeling a little bit held back by that. It can be about doing things differently. Perhaps you've never ever tried a particular, sport or food or genre of books, but in being curious about those, then you are developing new information in your head, more power. Knowledge is power, and then that gives you the courage to be able to have a conversation with somebody about something that you may not have thought that you knew anything about. And then all of a sudden you're engaged in a conversation with somebody that you're really enjoying as a consequence of using your curiosity to build your courage, build your knowledge, and have the conversation with somebody. So, and then your social networks expand as well. So I see everything very much joined up. And I think one of the things that people that have worked with me in the past probably Gail's on it about joining the dots. I really do think there's a lot of joining the dots in managing, in leading, in working with people, in trying to help them understand how things are kind of playing out in front of them.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about how does it feel to be in the conscious grid zone? You have experienced the unconscious grid, the tipping point, and you are now in the conscious grid zone. And I guess that it's relative to your growth as a person. You may find another conscious grid zone, later in life. Tell me a little bit how it feels.
So for me, and I've actually, I can say that I've used this model personally several times, and I've watched other people use it as well, but not actually knowing at the time that it was going to be my conscious grit model. But for me personally, I was in the zone of unconscious grit for 5 years. And when I had, at the end of that 5 years, 2 little children, no qualifications, living in public housing, very few aspirations about what I could do with my life. I actually thought that, in fact, one day I rang up the TAFE college here, which is kind of ironic because I ended up being, on their executive years later, and said, look, I'm thinking about doing the childcare assistant course. My confidence was so low, my self-esteem was so low, I honestly didn't even think I could complete a child carer, as it was at the time, qualification. I thought I needed to be the child care assistant. And fortunately, and this is another tipping point in the whole story, where this beautiful woman who I had a chance years and years later when she was in her 80s to actually say to her, you probably won't remember this conversation, but she said to me, tell me a bit about yourself. And when I told her, she said, don't be ridiculous. You are going to come and do the associate diploma. Oh, okay. So I juggled, doing the associate diploma with, 2 little kids and, 2 years part-time, 1 year full-time. But it took me into a whole range of other, benefits in our lives. For example, I had a qualification, I had employment, I was able to get out of public housing. I was able to, expand my social networks. I was able to support my kids really, really well. And throughout the year, and it taught me that you can, if you have, again, that growth mindset, if you say, okay, I am going to have a go at that, because I could have said to that, to Joan, no, just put me in the assistant course. But just going, oh, okay, someone has said I'm good enough. I am going to take that and I am going to run with it. And then I've had, a fabulous career and done lots and lots of things with my Celebrant business on the side. And I have a Masters of Public Administration as well, and a Bachelor of Social Science. And so it's, it's so important to get into that zone, because it is where opportunities present themselves and you feel that you can give it a go and you will give it a go. And it's also where, if you get knocked down again, and, I've had plenty of ups and downs in my career, if you get knocked down again, you know that you've got the skills, because you've built your resilience muscles, you've built your courage muscles. You can get back up and go again. That is so important, and you can't put a price on that learning. It is incredibly valuable. So I hope that describes and paints the picture of what it was like for me.
Absolutely. And, I was just listening to what you were saying. And sometimes the person that we expect the least from says something that activates our brain, and it gives us the confidence for us to embrace the new opportunity. So you are happy with the assistant certificate, and suddenly you're doing an associate diploma, and then you continue on learning and,
Mm,
gathering more certifications. And so we need to keep our ears open, I would say, and talk to people. And that's the curiosity within us. And,
mm.
think about what people say, because usually people see in us things we don't see. That's why, we love the 360 feedback assessment, because sometimes it's good to know the things that we are not doing well. But sometimes it's about knowing what the strengths you have that everybody sees, and you don't think, you can embrace these strengths, or you have these strengths at all.
Yeah, that's right. The 360 assessments are incredibly valuable, and the light bulbs that come on for people when they can see a matching strength or a blind spot, especially, and it just opens up the opportunity to have a great conversation with somebody. And I always combine my debriefing with a follow-up coaching session, so that we've actually constructed a plan and able to see the progress then against that particular pillar within the neuro leader assessment. So it's a really valuable way. I do think I always obviously set people up to expect that they're going to see these two columns with their self-assessment and then the assessment of the combined results of others. And they are so eager to see that. And of course, it's human nature. They go for the negative first, but to see those blind, and then I call them blind spots, as you do in the model. And it provokes some great learning. And again, if you're talking with somebody around this kind of personal development and professional development, although, I don't believe you can actually tear them apart. It's all the one thing. It's the one person. You really can get some great advances. I've got some lovely client stories of people that have really changed their behaviour in the workplace, or changed the way they've interacted with other people to be able to be less distracted, be more focused, and get the outcomes that their employer wants. And then their employer has noticed that, and all of a sudden they've got the promotion that they've wanted previously, So it's really, really rewarding for them to have invested in the I4 Neuroleader model. They invest that time, they invest that commitment to do things differently, but it is paying off. And beautiful to see.
That's great. And one of the things that you say in your book is think like a bee. What do you mean by that?
I think this is so important. And, the zone of conscious grit, and I call it a zone for a reason, because I don't want it to be a specific point that you feel like you have to be at that point or on that point all the time, because that's not realistic. That's not what life is. So the zone of conscious grit, I often draw it, and I drew it for a client yesterday afternoon, just like a flower with the sweet spot in the middle. And if you're thinking like a bee, then you are hovering around that flower, and occasionally you are hopping onto that sweet spot and doing what you need to do, to get your honey and your nectar and make your honey and whatnot. So I use that kind of analogy so that people don't feel as though they, have to be operating, in alignment with the zone right in the middle all the time. That would be completely exhausting. But you need to remember that if you are sometimes feeling like things are not going so well for you, you might be just drifting towards the edge of the zone, back into the zone of unconscious grit. That's not where you want to go. So just recognize it, dip into your toolbox and find whatever it is that you need to be able to get you back into the zone of conscious grit. And, an example of a tool might be, in my book, I talk about a tool that was shown to me, back in 2004. So it's been with me for a long, long time. But it's a tool called the cloak of uninsultability. And, we all have times when we have to have a really difficult conversation or an interaction with somebody who we know is just, the interaction's not going to be pleasant and we're not looking forward to it. And so just to give yourself a little bit of mental protection for that, you put on your invisible cloak. No one knows you've got it on except for you. And when you've got your cloak on, you are just that little bit stronger, because you know that whatever that person is saying or however they're looking like or whatever, the body language is, it's actually not going to affect you. You can stick with your mission in the moment to get your message across, knowing that you're going to come out of this okay. Now, it's not a tool that you would use all day, every day. Absolutely, it's not. But it is a little trick that you can use every now and again. So if you're, let's say in a workplace situation where, there's a lot of toxicity around and you are just feeling as though you are the only person who's perhaps advocating for a particular policy position, that you want to put it on the table, you want to argue, but you're going to get quite a bit of inappropriate interaction back with you, then my advice is, okay, I don't want to go into the zone of unconscious grit where I'm going to just feel disempowered and I'm not going to use my courage and I'm just going to feel really flat afterwards. Find the tool. The tool in that case is likely the invisible cloak. So you go, before you go into that meeting, you put your cloak on, you go in, you say your piece. The feedback is just going to, you're going to be sensible enough to listen to the feedback, but it's actually not going to hurt your heart if you're a person whose heart gets hurt by inappropriate feedback and difficult environments. So that's an example of just being able to get the tool that you want. So in my book, I talk about the cloak, and I also provide a range of other, tools that you can use, and suggest that you put them in, again, a virtual toolbox, an imaginary toolbox, and really think about what that toolbox might look like. And so that it's your go-to. It's like, yeah, okay, my battered red metal toolbox or my great big vintage handbag or whatever it is you're going to use is full of all these things. They're there. When I need them, I just dip in and get it out and use the one I want. So I think that's a really powerful thing for people to do.
Yes, definitely. And, the brain doesn't know the difference between what it sees and what it can imagine. So if you close your eyes and imagine you have this bag of tricks and you are able to use them, it's like they are there for you. For you, they are
Yes,
available. So
yes.
it's we can trick the brain into thinking, that we do have things that we can use versus or helpless or I don't know what to do. So it's once you try that, it's fantastic that you have provided these exercises in your book to whoever reads the book because people need it. We live our lives not like Olympic champions. We live our lives like average people, and we expect to do everything on our own. And in reality, it is a journey of development
Mm,
to think like an Olympian, to get a coach, a mentor, or a buddy that can go with us in the journey, to read the books or listen to podcasts that can help us be more positive about who we are. And
mm,
if you have done an amazing career, and I'm just wondering, as an executive, if you were leading your team, what would you recommend other leaders to do to wake up this idea that people can go from being unstuck to the conscious grit area? What
mm,
would you do in the
mm.
workplace?
Yeah. So I would focus on relationships. I think that it is just incredibly important that you get to know the people that you are working with, that you are leading, um, and that develop. You don't have to be everybody's friend, but you do need to let those people know that you care, that you are interested in what they have to say, that you will consider different approaches, different ways of doing things. Um, I used to, I loved getting teams of people together that were what I call diagonal slices across the organisation. So, it might be, and depending on how your organisation is structured, but most organisations have some kind of silo, like structure, which is a real danger. So for me, it's identifying where those silos are and being able to craft opportunities for those silos or representatives of those silos to come together to work on, the organization's goals, mission, operations, whatever it is that you are, wanting to make improvements in your organization. And I've also in the past done the diagonal slice. So I made sure that, the CEO through to the cleaner are sitting in the same room having conversation about what really matters in that organisation. Not, so doing whatever I can at whatever opportunity to reduce the hierarchy that is often needed for, decision making and accountability and, perhaps to meet audit requirements and all those things. But in terms of having a human organisation where people actually feel valued, I think it's so important to get people in the same room and talking together, irrespective of their position in the hierarchy. I also have used over the years models to help people understand, how they interact within a team. And of course, to be able to do that, they need to have a good insight into their own drivers and how they operate in the workplace. So again, models, such as the I4 Neuro Leader model, can work absolutely beautifully to meet that goal of helping everybody understand about the others in their work environment. So very people focused doesn't mean that you lose sight of the work that needs to be done and the outputs, but you're not going to get the outputs if you don't understand your people. And then when you do understand them and you've connected with them, if there are gaps in technical expertise or gaps in the way they interact with each other in a positive way, then you've got to find the way to develop those people. It is so important, and it needs to be development opportunities that are meaningful for them. There's no point sending them off to something that they're just going to, come back with their arms folded and, or come back and it's never spoken about again. That's the other thing. If you invest in a professional development program, make sure that you continue it on in the workplace and continue to have the discussions, maximize your investment in the program. Yeah.
One thing, Gail, is that obviously you are a very people-oriented person. I find that, we all have differences in how we approach life and work. And some people, and you have probably worked for some bosses who they weren't just, keen on people, or they didn't seem to care, or they didn't care.
Yeah.
How do you work with people like that? Because there are a lot of people like that. They are only focused on the task, on the outcomes, and people are just, something that comes and goes, and they don't simply care.
Yeah. And look, that is a reality, and it is one of the trickier parts of being in a workplace. If you are working for or with somebody who just does not care, or who, worse than that, is actually perpetuating toxic behavior, in a toxic culture, it's very difficult. So, in one of the things that I like to think about, and in my book, I devote chapter 9 to this model that I've come up with of managing. I call it managing SUDS, SUDS. So, managing yourself, managing up, managing down, and managing sideways. So, for that, it's about figuring out, who do you need to manage up to? And a very wise person once said to me, Gail, we all have a master. So figuring out who that master is, and if that's the person that's causing the grief in the workplace or the relationship between you, you just need to figure out this way, a way of dealing with them. And if you look at it from, well, if I was in unconscious grid, I'd probably just persevere with it and just not try and do anything differently. If I'm in the zone of conscious grit, I'm actually going to really think about how to manage that person. And it might be that you sit yourself down and do a bit of brainstorming around, what am I going to do? Okay, so I'm supposed to start at 8. I know they're always in here at 7:30. Okay, for the next week, I'm going to come in at 7:30. I'm going to go past their office and just say, hey, do you want a coffee? Try and build a bit of rapport, try and build a bit of interaction. So, just thinking about how it is that you can develop some kind of relationship, because you don't actually know what's going on for that person. Maybe they are having big issues with their master. maybe there's something that you can do to help them to, you know, respond differently. Maybe they've got this huge filter and they don't even know. They're just absolutely not even cued into what else is going on in the workplace. So, you know, it's about giving people the benefit of the doubt in some ways and trying to, you know, kind of figure out a variety of ways to infiltrate whatever's going on and be able to work out your management strategy. Similarly, you know, who do you manage down, and who do you manage that's on your same level, or who pops into your mind when you're thinking about managing sideways? And that could be, you know, people in your workplace, but it also could be your family. It could be, you know, your suppliers who are, you know, perhaps not supplying, or your vendors that you work with that aren't doing the right thing with you. How are you going to actually have a partnership approach with them? And you more likely to think about an appropriate arrangement if you're thinking about managing them sideways, rather than thinking about them as being down here where, you know, maybe you come up with strategies where you are doing things to them rather than partnering. I hope that makes some sense.
Absolutely. A great response. Thank you for that. And probably we have time for one last question. And it has been very insightful to listen to you, Gail. So you have been a wedding celebrant, and also you're a celebrant for funerals. You have seen people in joyful moments and very sad moments. What what would you say that is the, you know, the biggest piece of advice you can give to someone to deal with this, the moments that are joyful and the moments that are sad, and that we all have to go through? What have you noticed, and what are the type of things that we can say to ourselves to deal particularly with the tougher moments?
So I think that, you know, and I'll just sort of deal with them separately and tie them together. So when couples are planning their wedding, it's all about perfection. They want it to be perfect, whatever perfect is for them. Similarly, when a family is planning a service, either a celebration of life service or a funeral service or a memorial service for their loved one, they want it to be perfect. And sometimes they have no idea what perfect really means, because they're confused in the funeral sense about whether it needs to be perfect for them or perfect for the person who has passed. So there's that complexity as well. My advice is, just let go of the concept of perfection, because it will drive you into the ground. It is not going to be perfect, whatever that means, but it's going to be okay. And you are going to end up married, and you are going to end up having said farewell to your loved one in a way that, you know, you will remember and cherish for the rest of your life. So I think, you know, getting rid of that concept of perfection is really important in both cases. In terms of the tough times, I think, you know, one of the things that I have noticed is that, you know, not all families, and I mean, I knew this, not all families get along. So, you know, when I walk into somebody's home to talk to them about how they want to say farewell to their loved one, I can be faced with a really united family who are grieving, you know, and their solidarity in their grieving is so evident. They're the easy people to work with. There are other families where I walk in and there's 10 or a dozen people, and they're all kind of jibing at each other about, well, no, let's not do that. We don't want to spend that money because that's part of my inheritance. And did you know who's got this? And, you know, that's awkward. And for those people, I just have to say, for the here and now, we just need to focus on one thing, which is, you know, this celebration of life or this funeral service. We need to put it in a box. So put the box around what we're talking about today. And I would recommend, I think that the piece of advice that I would give to all of us that are, you know, still living on this earth is that have a chat with your loved ones about what you want your end of life service to look like. because the families who I go to see who can say, oh yeah, mum left this list of music that she wanted, or, you know, I found this note in dad's drawer and he'd scribbled down this name of this poem and it just says on the bottom of it, for my funeral. Those little things absolutely matter and make a big difference to how loved ones that are left behind feel about the service that they're creating and about honouring their loved ones. So if you can, you know, drop some crumbs for your loved ones, I would absolutely recommend that you do that. And for those of you who are planning an end-of-life celebration, try and have a bit of a think about, you know, is it for us that are living, or is it for the person who has passed, or is it a combination? Because that'll guide you in terms of your thinking. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I haven't personally had to go through all of these preparations, you know, except for my wedding and then a couple of funerals, but it was done very in a pacific way. So I can't even imagine some of the situations that you may be facing when you go into these houses. So thank you so much for the advice. I think it will be helpful for many of the people who are listening. So
Good.
Gail, you have written a magnificent book, Conscious Grid. Where can people get it?
People, there we go. That's my book. People can get it if you're in Hobart at the Hobart Bookshop, or at Dimmicks in Centrepoint. Launceston, you can get it at Petrarch's, but I hope that we've got lots of people from everywhere watching. So if you type it into your browser, Conscious Grid, you can find that you can get it at Amazon and all of the other major online booksellers.
Excellent, excellent. And if people want to reach out to look for your services, remind us again of your website.
Yep. So the website is Every When Solutions. So EVERYWHEN Solutions, all one word, .com.au. And people say, gosh, that's an interesting name, Gail, or a strange name, or where did you get that from? And look, it just reflects the way that I like to work. You know, I like to work with people at their every when, you know, whenever they need me. So I've just flipped it over. Yeah. So I'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much, Gail, for chatting with us, and all the best with the book, the promotion, and your usual activities. And for everybody who has tuned in, thank you for tuning in. And, you know, we'll see you in our next episode of the Brain Friendly channel. Have a good one.
Thank you, Silvia. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.